Resources Management Council. This is our only full council meeting for the month of December. It is 6:10 p.m. And we're conducting this meeting via webinar format on Zoom. Before I have our moderator explain what that format is for the benefit of the audience, I'll introduce our council members and our staff. First, council, when I call your name, if you can just indicate that you are here or present. I'll start with myself, Jennifer Cervenka, Chair. Next, Raymond Koya, Vice Chair.
Raymond Koya, present.
Thank you. Jerry Sahajian.
Jerry Sahajian here.
Michael Hudner.
Mike Hudner here.
Don Gomez.
Don Gomez here.
Joy Montanaro.
Joy Montanaro here.
Ron Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon here.
And Patricia Reynolds.
Patricia Reynolds here.
From staff, we have our Executive Director, Jeffrey Willis.
Jeff Willis here.
Our Deputy Director, Jim Boyd.
Jim Boyd, present, Madam Chair.
We have two legal counsel here. We have first Tony DeSisto.
Here.
And then John Longo.
Yes.
Okay. We have Dave Reese, our principal biologist.
Dave Reese here.
Okay. And we have Danny Goulet, our principal engineer.
Dan Goulet here.
Lisa Turner, our secretary.
Lisa Turner here.
And our moderator, Ryan Moore.
Here, Madam Chair.
Okay, and I also see Leah Feldman.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce you all to our newest staff, Leah Feldman. She is a coastal policy analyst that has started yesterday. So I asked her to attend the meeting to get a flavor of what we do that's every second and fourth Tuesday of every month. But you will see Leah's face on Zoom and hopefully in person sooner than later as issues come up.
Welcome.
Thanks. Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Real quick, where'd you come from?
I came here from New York State's Department of Coastal Management as a NOAA Coastal Management Fellow.
We're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Okay. We also have, hold on, I think I didn't identify Cindy Tagney, our court reporter, who's very important for this proceeding. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we start with the agenda, Mr. Moore, would you go through the Zoom rules?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. This is the Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council virtual subcommittee meeting, the 8th day of December, conducted in accordance with the Executive Order 20-46, 98th Supplemental Emergency Declaration Extension of Executive Orders. If you're having problems with your computer audio, use this number for the meeting. Both phone numbers and password will be placed in the chat box after I'm done with this presentation. A note to all meeting participants and attendees, please be advised this is an online meeting including all audio, video, names, and comments are visible in the chat box are being recorded. All members of the public who wish to comment during these proceedings must correctly identify themselves before proceeding. Council members, applicants, and CRMC staff, turn video on. Do not use phone and computer audio at the same time. Use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Identify yourself by name. Use the chat box to communicate any issues with audio or video to the moderator. Members of the public, please keep your video off, mute your microphone when not speaking. Use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Wait to be recognized by the chair and unmuted by the moderator to speak. Identify yourself by name. Those on the phone, please press *9 to use the raise hand function. When recognized, identify yourself by name. And please use the chat box to communicate any issues with audio or video to the moderator. Q&A is disabled for this meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay, starting with the approval of the minutes from our meeting of Sorry, I lost you for a second. Okay, starting with our minutes from November 24th, 2020. I'll take a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, Ray Coyer moves to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coy. Is there a second?
Second, Mike Hudner.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'll take a roll call. Mr. Koya,
Ray Coyer votes aye.
Jerry Sahajian,
Jerry Sahajian, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Mike Hudner, aye.
John Gomez,
John Gomez, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion to approve the minutes of November 24, 2020 meeting carries. Moving on to subcommittee reports. Mr. Boyd, do you have anything you'd like to report?
No subcommittee reports, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Mr. Willis, do we have any report out from you?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I just have a couple of items. As you know, and a couple other council members know, we have had the subcommittee for the matter on Perry Rasso, which is an aquaculture application that the subcommittee is hearing. We have had several hearings, evidentiary hearings on that matter, and have 2 more meetings coming up with the subcommittee later on this month, December 16th and December 30th, to take public comment on that matter. Once those public comment hearings are concluded, the subcommittee will meet at a time to be determined, but probably in January, to hold a workshop on the matter and make a recommendation to the council for its consideration at a later date after that. As for offshore wind, staff, legal counsel, FAB, and Orsted South Fork Wind Farm team are in negotiation process right now. We have had several meetings between the 3 parties, and while I can't say we're making great headway, we are making headway. So we will continue to keep the council apprised of that. But as you know, we have a January 31st deadline to make a consistency decision. So staff and legal counsel are hoping to get things wrapped up as soon as possible, hopefully by the end of this month. We will let you know more on that as we progress. And lastly, I'll leave you with a bit of very good news. I had mentioned earlier on this fall that the CRMC, along with the Department of Environmental Management, have worked out a plan to open up a public access path along the Weekapaug Breachway in Westerly on DEM property, DEM managed property. That project is beginning tomorrow. So the staffs of both agencies will be down on site, beginning the grubbing of the vegetation and the development of a pathway that gets the public down to the water from the parking lot, the fishing access parking lot that DEM also manages. So a bit of good news there. Well, we will help DEM with signage and advertisement, but that project looks to be a good one, and come spring should be well attended. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Willis? Okay. If none, we will proceed to our first item, which is public hearing on proposed rulemaking, management procedures 650 RICR 10-00-1. And I believe we have Mr. Boyd who's going to speak to this.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, council members, and the public attendees. These proposed management procedure amendments were reviewed by the CRMC Planning and Procedures subcommittees at their meetings of July 28th and August 25th of this year, and they were approved to proceed with the rulemaking process. The CRMC issued a 30-day public notice issued on November 20th, and the public comment period will end on December 21st, 2020. The substantive amendments are shown in sections 1.4.6a, and they're shown in the council's agenda packets at pages 11, 16, and 17. And these will reduce the application fee for small-scale, low-cost projects and reduce the fee from $50 to $25. And it will continue the application fee waiver for non-federal dredging projects associated with any Army Corps Federal Navigation maintenance projects in the Providence River or Harbor. And these amendments will also provide for an application fee waiver for coastal hazard resiliency projects that would be part of any Army Corps federally funded Rhode Island projects. In addition, these amendments include technical corrections to existing text and citations that were identified by CRMC staff in collaboration with the Office of the Secretary of State in the preparation of these amendments. Following the close of this public hearing on the proposed management procedure amendments, CRMC staff will prepare a brief memo and recommendations after the 30-day public notice period ends on December 21st. The staff memo will include any written comments received, and we will schedule a council meeting at a later date to consider approval of the proposed amendments. So with that, Madam Chair and council members, I would be happy to answer any questions that the council members may have. And otherwise, we can open the public hearing for public comment.
Any questions for Mr. Boyd? These are very straightforward, Mr. Boyd.
They are indeed.
Yes. If there are no questions for Mr. Boyd, then we would open the matter up for a public comment. So if anyone who's attending this meeting who would like to provide comment on the proposed amendments to our management procedures, I would ask that you raise your hand so that the moderator can admit you so that you can provide your comment. Mr. Moore, I'm looking at the attendees list and I don't see that anyone has their hand up.
No one has their hand up, Madam Chair, and nobody has commented in the chat box either.
Okay. All right, so either legal counsel, are we okay to close the public hearing?
Yes.
With the no comments being provided?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
So the public hearing is now closed. Back to you, Mr. Boyd. We've completed this public hearing portion, and you will come back again at a later time to have a formal vote on the proposed amendments.
Correct, Madam Chair. The public comment period is open until December 21st. So we will receive any comments that might come in during that time period. And as I mentioned, we will prepare a staff memo, include any public comments that may be submitted. And at a later date, we will schedule a meeting of the council to consider these amendments for approval with any staff recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Moving on in our agenda. Next, we have a petition for declaratory ruling 2020-07-083, the Dumplings Association. This is a matter that is going to be continued, but I'd like to ask Mr. Willis if he would explain to the council and those who might be attending who want to hear it, why this is being continued to another date.
Sure, no, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we are continuing the matter based on a procedural matter that the legal counsel for the petitioners for this declaratory ruling has brought up. So we have in turn asked that legal counsel to submit to our council a written memorandum that supports his position that a public hearing is a requirement for the council to hear these matters. So once we receive that written memorandum from the legal counsel for the petitioners, we'll reschedule the matter at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Okay, we're on to our last item on the agenda, which is an application which has been sent out to public notice and is before the council for final decision. That is 2017-03-066, Quonset Development Corporation. Modification of a previously issued assent. Mr. Goulet and Mr. Reese, are you tag teaming this or you're going, Mr. Goulet?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, would you provide a summary of your staff report?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a modification to allow blasting of rock that was discovered in the approved Quonset Development Corporation electric boat channel during the previous dredge window. The rock outcrop was missed when the sediment was characterized by an unfortunate spacing of the borings, which happened to be on either side of this isolated rock area. Attempts were made during the 2019-2020 dredge season to dredge the rock with the equipment on site, but they had little success. After discussing relocating the approved channel to avoid the newly discovered rock outcrop, all three regulatory agencies indicated a preference for blasting the rock in the approved channel as a modification. Otherwise, it would have required a new regulatory approval process and abandoning a significant area that was partially dredged. The QDC and its consultants then spent the late winter and the spring quantifying and characterizing the rock in order to develop a removal plan that includes this proposed blasting. The plan took a significant amount of time to develop in order to assure safe navigation within the channel, the work to be protective of the resources in the area, and to be the minimum necessary. The plan included hiring the dredging and blasting contractors who together recently completed an extensive year-long blasting program in New Bedford, Massachusetts. That project, which will be elaborated on by the QDC, had significantly more blasting events and had zero marine mammal impacts. These contractors also came to the site with different equipment than the original contractor. They were able to remove a significant amount of the rocky material, reducing the originally proposed blast area from 130,000 square feet to approximately 30,000 square feet, and an overall volume from approximately 9,000 cubic yards to approximately 1,000 cubic yards. The Army Corps of Engineers, Rhode Island DEM, and the CRMC all have permits that needed to be modified to include this blasting. The Corps and the DEM have issued their modifications. The state agencies defer to the Corps since they have the authorities relevant to the endangered and protected species, as well as extensive experience with underwater blasting. The Rhode Island DEM did collaborate with the Corps on specific fisheries issues, and all of the agencies were in regular communications during this review. It was the intention from the start of the review that all of the agencies would adopt a consistent set of stipulations for any approvals that may be granted. Well, STA will allow the QDC to make its presentation that outlines the proposed blasting program along with its avoidance and mitigation measures in detail. I want to emphasize that all of the permit agencies have utilized the 21 NOAA recommended protective stipulations. These stipulations are in the council's package and cover protected species observers, speed restrictions, habitat monitoring, and limiting the number of blast events. These specific stipulations are in addition to a very detailed blasting plan that was part of the federal approval. There were several objections that were received during the review and public notice. These objections generally are concerned with adherence to the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the CRMC process. The state relies on the experts at NOAA for marine mammals as they have the regulatory authorities and experience, which is why we recommended adopting their stipulations. Also, the CRMC does not have any authority within the Marine Mammal Protection Act. As far as CRMC process is concerned, this modification was publicly noticed, and we're having a full public hearing for the process. A persistent comment is that the applicant does not have an incidental take authorization, and that the CRMC should require this. This is not something we have the authority to do. The Corps has not required this, nor have other sections of NOAA, the agency that provided the project-specific stipulations. This permit would allow, the incidental take permit would allow a take or a kill of a mammal. The applicant's contention here is that the measures being utilized and the recent demonstration by the specific contractors on this project will enable the project to avoid blasting impacts on mammals and protected species or takes, which make this permit unnecessary. Since staff rely on the expertise of our federal partners for these types of projects, staff recommends approval of the blasting with the exact stipulations as the Army Corps of Engineers approval. These stipulations are included in the council package.
Thank you, Mr. Goulet. Mr. Reese, are you adding anything or just here for questions?
No, Madam Chair, I don't have anything to add at this time, but I am here for questions.
Okay. A question for you, Mr. Goulet, on what we do have authority to review, what you and Mr. Reese review that's within our authority.
I'm not sure I understand what the question is.
Okay, so I heard that we don't have the expertise or jurisdiction under the MMPA, and so we rely upon our federal partners for that analysis and determination of appropriate stipulations. But in order for the applicant to move forward, they need to have an assent modified from us. So what are the things that we would have reviewed that would have been within our jurisdiction? You're the dredge guy, so are you looking at dredge related items? Or is this, yes?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So we looked at their proposed plan in terms of the actual mechanical dredging, the transportation of the dredge material, the disposal of the dredge material, and myself and Mr. Reese relied really on the expertise for those biological issues. We're satisfied that the proposal meets the Red Book standards for the dredging operation, specific the mechanical part of that dredging.
Okay, thank you. And did you say that the applicant, you believe the applicant is going to go through all the conditions and precautions that they're proposing to take rather than you going through each of those?
I can't speak for them. I know that the QDC would like to make a presentation as part of their effort this evening. So if Mr. Spinard, who will be speaking for the QDC, doesn't go through those sufficiently, Mr. Reese or myself will be happy to cover anything that is you feel is missing. Okay.
And what are the other approvals that are needed in addition to our modification?
The Army Corps of Engineers, as well as Rhode Island DEM, also needed to modify their permits, and they have, and both of those agencies have issued their modification.
Okay, so we're the last agency here.
Yes.
Okay. And is it true that the blasting has to occur in this month in January? Did I read that correctly?
You did. So actually, that it's still considered part of the dredging. It has to be done within the dredge window. So the blasting and then the excavation of that blasted rock, as well as the remainder of the channel, needs to be done by January 31st.
Okay. And if it's not done during that time, what happens?
Well, they would either have to request an extension which are very hard to come by, or they would have to finish it up next dredge window.
And what's the purpose of having a limitation, having a dredge window?
That's protective of basically winter flounder spawning for this area, but it's a fisheries window to be protective of the fisheries.
Okay. You mentioned that one of the objectors has taken the position that an incidental take permit would be required. Who issues that if it were required?
It's a portion of NOAA would be the ones who would issue that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other council members have questions for Mr. Goulet or Mr. Reese? Mr. Gomez, you're on mute.
Just one question. You indicated you got this down to 1,000 cubic yards necessary for the blasting. What's the impact if we just didn't take that out? Do we just lose 1,000 cubic yards of the disposal site, or is there a bigger impact than that?
There's a much bigger impact. So the reason for the channel is to allow there's a new ocean-going barge that will transport the sections of the new Columbia class submarine, and it needs that width and depth of channel to safely navigate.
Okay, thank you. Columbia rules.
So just a question on that. If the blasting did not, if we didn't authorize that, then this barge couldn't get through the channel, then the parts for the new class of submarines couldn't get to where they needed to get to be assembled into the new submarines?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Mr. Goulet? Okay, if none, then I would open it up to the applicant. If you would, any applicant representatives, if you would raise your hand so that you can be admitted by our moderator. And then you can begin your presentation once admitted.
You should be coming in now.
Okay.
Yes, this is Ted Spanad. Hold on, I got to start video. Yes, Ted Spanad, Quonset Development Corporation.
Hello, Mr. Bernard.
I have a video presentation that I like to make. So if at this time I could share screen.
Mr. Spanad, you should be able to.
Okay, let me try. Can everyone see that?
No.
No.
Well, I hear like a TV in the background. Is that?
No.
Someone could just, everyone could mute other than Mr. Spanard, that'd be helpful.
So it's showing on my screen.
Mr. Spanard, hold on a second.
At the bottom of your screen, there should be a green share screen button.
Mr. Willis?
Um,
Mr. Willis? Can you figure out, is that coming from your end? No.
Hold on, I see it.
Mr. Hajian,
Yes.
could you mute?
Can you see it now?
We can.
Okay, so let me just restore it. We all can see it?
I can see it. This is the chair.
Okay, great. So I would like to begin by thanking the Executive Director, Jeff Willis, and the staff members, Don Goulet and Dave Reese, for their help on this.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Notwithstanding the fact that Mr. Spinard has this video that he's going to be showing, this is in the nature of testimony. May I swear him in?
Please.
Mr. Spinard, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do?
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
Sure. Your name is Edward J. Spinard, S-P-I-N-A-R-D, Jr., and I am the Director of Engineering for the Quonset Development Corporation.
Thank you.
So thank you. As I mentioned, I'd like to thank the staff to begin. As Dan has mentioned, we all recognize the importance of this project, not only for the state of Rhode Island, but also for the country in terms of national defense. The project is the dredging of a channel which would provide access to the Quonset channel from the electric boat facility in order to transport the Columbia-class submarine components, which require a greater depth in water than currently exists. We also recognize that there are other priorities that are just as important that must be addressed also. These include public safety, protection of the terrestrial and aquatic environment, and regulations related to essential fish habitat, endangered species, and the MMAP. So what do? We retain nationally recognized experts in each of these areas to openly and honestly assess the terrestrial and aquatic environment and to identify best practices to mitigate potential impacts and meet the regulatory requirements. Yes, hundreds of pages of documents were produced and submitted to the federal regulatory agencies. We did not ask, nor did we receive any waivers, variances, or special considerations. Let me just go through some of these documents that were submitted. A blasting plan, which included an operational plan which identified the means and methods for controlling the blasting. We are using confined blasting techniques, which bury the explosives, and that minimizes the blast wave propagation. We also have limitations on the size of the blast, the number of holes that we can do, and the operations plan identifies some of the safety features. There was also a safety plan that was submitted. That discusses all of the safety, health, and environmental considerations, including a safety plan, blast signals and notification, establishment of a blast safety zone, and the procedures for notification of the blasting, and contingency plans such as if we have a misfire or loss of downline or any lightning strikes. There's a monitoring plan. The monitoring plan is done to address the various procedures to protect human and marine life. We talk about a structure condition plan prior to the blasting, during the blasting, landside monitoring, and also monitoring during the blasting for marine life in the water environment. There's also a test plan. The test plan is performed at the beginning of the blasting program, and that's to evaluate and to minimize the size of the explosives. So what happens is that we begin with we begin with a small number of blast holes, and we build that up to production level. And the reason for that is so that we can monitor the blast waves to make sure that they're consistent with the models that have indicated the distance that those waves will travel. And I'm going to speak with that a little bit later. During the blast test program, we also have our fish and marine observers to protect the mammals. Also, the blasting is performed only during daylight hours so that the marine mammal observers can observe marine mammals. We also produced a supplementary underwater assessment report. Initially, when we did the blasting, we had a report that was produced in 2017. This was a supplemental one which specifically addressed the impacts of the blasting on the marine environment. The report identified potential impacts on fish, marine mammals, endangered species. It also identified the potential for the blast to create sediment that could go beyond the dredge area and cover up essential fish habitat. It also identified the potential for fly rock as a result of the blast, again, that could go beyond the channel area and cover up essential fish habitats. These, as Dan had mentioned, that when we went out for the bid on this project, we specifically included that the dredge contractor would have to have a special, what we call a backhoe dredge, which would have a rock bucket, which would be capable of digging into the rock to try to reduce the blast area. As a result of that, as Dan had mentioned, we initially had a very large area, over 100,000 square feet. The blasting program was 1,500 blast holes, a total of about 200 blast holes per day. We would blast 2 times a day, and it was going to take us 30 days to do that. This indicates the area, the original area of the blast hole, of the original area of blasting, which was identified by a resistivity survey as well as probes. Again, as a result of the rock bucket in the backhoe, these are actual photographs where you can see that we were removing large boulders. This one shows how large the rock bucket is, as well as the teeth within those buckets. Excuse me. So again, this is the original blast area is shown in the green, and the reduced blast area is shown in the red outline. The dots are the new blast holes that would be needed. So we reduced the blast area from 100,000 to 30,000 square feet. At most, we would have 57 holes The majority of them are going to be in the range of about 20 to 30, as you can see here. The larger areas in through here. We're only going to do 1 blast per day, and we reduced it to 15 days of blasting, which 3 are for the test. So following the submission of these reports, we also went into extensive consultation with the federal agencies, as well as with the local and state and federal regulatory agencies. As a result of that, there were several additional reports that were produced in consultation with these agencies to address the fish habitat, the marine mammals, the monitoring, and all of these were all incorporated into the performance standards that Dan has mentioned. Let me just explain a couple of those reports. So we had indicated that there was a blast monitoring program, as well as safety, as well as in operations. We held a public safety meeting with federal, state, and local authorities, including the Coast Guard. At that meeting, we explained to them the monitoring program, as well as the safety program, and we elicited their comments. The Coast Guard established a safety zone or exclusionary zone of 1,500 feet, as you can see in this photograph. That 1,500 feet is restricted. During the blasting event, it would be monitored by boats who would enforce that no one enters that zone during the blasting operation. The town of North Kingstown had asked us if we would produce some signs for public notice. These signs would be placed at their marinas and public boat launching ramps, indicating to the boaters that the Coast Guard has established this exclusionary zone and that blasting will be occurring, and please avoid the area. Also at these meetings, the protocol for notification to the local officials were established. Right now, we're going through that. There's a program where if you want to be notified, you can be notified an hour before the blast, 30 minutes before the blast, 15 minutes before the blast, 5 minutes before the blast, and then after the blast is complete. You can have all of those or just some of them. So that's a notification program that we have, that we're currently putting into place. I mentioned one of the other concerns that we identified was the potential for impacting the area outside of the blast area, which through video and side scan sonar, we identified as a hard rock area, which was an essential fish habitat area because the rock has microalgae in it, which the fish, particularly as Dan mentioned, the winter flounder like. And so there was a concern, again, as I had mentioned, about blasting, either making sediment go into that area or what we call fly rock from the blast. We talked to the, this was in consultation with the Natural Marine Fisheries. And again, they were concerned about those impacts, which we had initially identified and had a consultations with them. And so as a result of that, what we are going to do is a pre and post survey of those areas, a video survey, side scan sonar, again, to first identify if in fact there is this special fish habitat within this monitoring zone of about 2,400 feet to see if in fact there is this fish habitat within that zone, and then to do the post-monitoring to see if these potential impacts may have occurred. As far as the fly rock is concerned, the blast will only project that about 20 feet, and that is going to remain within the channel, because the blast actually happens about 30 feet off from the boundary at the toe of the slope, and so any fly rock will remain within the channel and then be removed. The 2,400 feet came up as a result of not necessarily sediment from the blast, because there was no really literature on that, but it was based on sediment from dredging. But in any event, we are going to modify pre and post that area to make sure that it has not been affected by the blast. Okay, we also entered into consultation with NOAA in terms of endangered species. Again, our report did identify them, and we went into consultation with them. And I'm going to read their conclusion. They said that based on the analysis that all effects of the proposed action will be insignificant and or discountable when added to the existing baseline conditions, we, which is NOAA, have determined that the proposed Quonset Point facility blasting effort is not likely to adversely affect any listed species. It will have what they call no effect on critical habitat under their jurisdiction. And they certified that this is based on best scientific and commercial data. They did indicate the potential for encountering whales, not necessarily the protected ones. And so on all of the dredge scows that are traveling to the disposal area will have, again, a certified marine observer to monitor that activity and avoid any marine mammals that they may have seen. So lastly, let's talk about the Marine Mammals Protection Act. There has been some, I think there's been some confusion about what that act requires. And so Ben Law, who is the person from NOAA, Office of Protective Services, is the one who administers the Marine Mammals Protection Act as far as the IHA, the Incidental Harassment Authorization. And I like to quote from Ben Law what he said. Quote, "It is important to note that the incidental take provisions of the MMPA do not function to allow or permit activities, but rather to authorize takes that is expected to occur incidental to the conduct of those activities. Therefore, entities conducting activities are not necessarily required to obtain incidental take authorization or to consult with NOAA fisheries. What they must do is to avoid any authorized take of marine mammals, which in general may be accomplished by either requesting authorizations for the take or by implementing a mitigation and monitoring plan that avoids the take. Our intention, our goal is zero take. And let me explain to you why that is. So first of all, the first thing that we need to do is to be able to identify what the zone would be resulting from the blast that would have a sound higher than what can be tolerated in this particular case by seals. In other words, a sound level that will cause injury, that will cause a take. So we went to JASCO, again, nationally recognized for acoustical monitoring. And they identified what the sound wave would, what the injury sound wave criteria is based on US Navy studies. And then from that, they do various models, which then give them the distance that this sound wave is expected to travel. And that is based on the number of the blast. So this particular graph right here shows the zones from the blast for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 blast holes. The criteria was, again, it's very technical. Anyways, the criteria is SEL, a sound equivalent level of 185 decibels, and then a peak of 218. Let me just go to the next slide. So again, what I said this previous slide showed those areas. So the next thing is the most important, is to have a robust monitoring program so that we will have zero takes. And so what we did is, again, we went to one of the best in the country, and as Dan mentioned, who has the experience from the New Bedford project, where they obtained zero takes. I'm going to talk about that real quick later. But let me just go through the specific methods that we're going to use, because it is very robust. And I use in every known monitoring technique to get zero takes. So the first one is the visual monitoring for marine mammals present. We're going to have 3 survey vessels with a crew of 3 people on each, who are 2 biologists and 1 vessel operator. That means there's going to be 8 biologists out there who are observing. These are certified by the certified marine biologists. 6 of them are going to be stationed on the survey vessels, which will be monitoring those zones based on the blast charge. And then 2 are actually stationed on the blasting vessel itself. As I said, they're NOAA approved for monitoring. The monitoring will begin a minimum of 30 minutes prior to, or at least 1 hour prior to each blast event. The observers, as I said, will be stationed on the blast barge, and then they're all observing, scanning the blast zone. And blasting activity will be halted if one of those observers observes a seal within those zones. That blast, that observer can stop the blast 3 seconds before it goes off. So what happens is there's a notification at 1 hour, there's a notification at 10. At 10 seconds, they start counting it off, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. When they get to 3, they unkey the mic so that if there is an observer who sees a mammal, the blast is stopped. Let's go on to the next method. This is called passive acoustic monitoring. It's not done very often, but we're doing it. And through the passive acoustic monitoring, a technician, in a separate boat, by the way, will listen to the aquatic environment using underwater microphones for the presence of marine mammals. Again, this is underwater monitoring. The acoustical data is collected with a hydrophone array from one of the Fathom is the company, survey vessel, and analyzed. And this is done in real time for the presence of vocalizing marine mammals. They tell me that seals are quite vocal. This is done real time. Our other method, hydroacoustic side scan sonar, fish finders. Fishery biologists will use hydroacoustics to monitor for the presence of school and fish in the exclusive area zone. Again, this is not only for seals, but also for fish. The fish finder system locates fish through transmitted sound pulses, measuring the time it takes for echoes to return, and calculates the distance to the objects. If any school of fish or protected species are detected in the exclusionary zone, no demolition will occur until the fish school or protective species are confirmed to be outside the exclusionary zone. Any object that are in the water between the surface and the bottom may also be displayed. And this monitoring system works with the fish startle system they use together, again, to monitor if there are any fish or seals within those exclusionary zones. If there are, then they can again call the blast off. And I've been told that you can actually see like a school of fish, and if there is a seal, the seal is following them. Their bait, you know, that's their food. And then when the startle system tells the fish to get out of there, the seal generally usually follows. And so the next item is that fish startle system that will be deployed from a separate survey vessel and used to herd any noted school and fish from side scan sonar findings out of the exclusionary zone. 15 minutes to the blasting event, the fish startle system will be deployed on a survey vessel that allows for startle systems coverage of the blasting area. If any fish school or protected species are detected in the exclusionary zone, no demolition will occur until the fish schools or protected species are confirmed to be outside. The two systems, fish startle and hydroacoustic side scan sonar, will be used together up until approximately 2 to 5 minutes before the decking. And then in addition to that, in addition to monitoring for the fish and seals, we also monitor to see that if the model predictions of that exclusionary zone are correct. So when the blasting event occurs, at the perimeter, we'll be monitoring to see if that blast level is actually the volume that the model has predicted. So we have underwater sound level of blasting events will be measured to verify the sound levels do not exceed the set threshold within the protective zone. Through use of sound meters and underwater microphones, hydrophones, the sound level of each blasting event will be measured. Sound levels will be monitored in real time. In the event that the sound levels are higher than determined through the JASCO report, Fathom will extend the monitoring exclusionary zone as necessary. So those are our monitoring so that we will get 0 takes. Now, why do we feel very confident in this? Well, as Dan mentioned, Cashman Dredgen and Fathom have done this at New Bedford Harbor. New Bedford Harbor was a blasting program for over a year. It covered 411,642 square feet compared with our 30,000. They drilled 5,511 holes compared with our 300. The most that they had was about 80 holes. They had multiple shots per day. They ended up with 0 take. I have several day reports that they provided to me, which do show the observers stopping the blasting. In many instances, well, in several instances, and waiting until the seal had left the exclusionary zone. They had a very unique thing about New Bedford. There's a fishing fleet, and the seals like to follow that. Again, they had 0 takes. So in conclusion, we're asking, or we have shown, that we have retained nationally recognized experts in each one of these fields who have produced reports, who in consultation with the federal regulatory agencies and public safety have supplemented those reports. We have, and as a result of that, as Dan had mentioned, there's a whole series of performance standards specifically addressing each one of those areas that I have discussed. Those performance standards are rules that we will follow. As Dan mentioned, we have received our permit from the Army Corps of Engineers and the Water Quality Certificate. What we request is CRMC to consider the assent for this program. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spinard. Are you done with your presentation?
Yes, I am.
Okay, because I saw we're on 18 of 21, so. Mr. Spinard, you looked at the staff report, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you reviewed all the proposed stipulations, most of which are conditions that I think you're already subject to under your other permits, but there's a couple of CRMC, I believe, specific conditions as well. Do you agree with all of those?
I do.
Any other questions for Mr. Spinard on his presentation, or what you might want to ask that wasn't in the presentation? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spinard. I think at this point, if there's no questions from council members, we'll go to those in the audience who may want to provide comment either in support or in opposition. So this is the time, if anyone has indicated they want to speak, they will be admitted by Mr. Moore. And if you haven't indicated but would like to, please do raise your hand.
Madam Chair, Susanna Holloway wishes to speak.
All right, could you please admit her? Ms. Holloway?
Oh,
Hi.
hello. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, council members, for letting me address you tonight and letting me speak. And thank you so much for having accepted my written comments and the exhibits that I attached. Let me begin by saying that I oppose your giving the blasting permit to Quonset Development Corporation without Quonset Development Corporation either making the perimeter much, much bigger based on page 80 of the packet in front of you, which shows that behavioral takes of marine mammals could occur within 4,662 feet. We're not just talking about blasting their ear membranes. We're talking about behavioral takes also. That's a much bigger perimeter than what they're prepared to try to monitor. And also, I would object to your granting this blasting permit without QDC going to NOAA Incidental Take Unit and running it by the Incidental Take Unit in the form of applying for an incidental harassment authorization as they are commanded to do under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The Marine Mammal Protection Act prohibits any take of a marine mammal. A take is not just a mortality event. It's not just a kill. It's harming the body of the seal, which means blowing out their membranes in their ears. And it is also harassing them such that it disturbs feeding, foraging, mating, breeding, and care of the young. So any behavioral harassment and take is also encompassed within the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Mr. Spinard, I think, misrepresented to this council his interactions with NOAA. He quoted an email from Benjamin Laws as if he and Benjamin Laws had been in contact, but they had not. He was quoting the email that Benjamin Laws wrote to me on December 3rd that I shared with you all so that it could be shared with Quonset Development Corporation, because I believe in open and honest government. I resent his trying to imply that he somehow had communicated with NOAA Incidental Take Unit, because that is not the truth. The only communications with NOAA were with the unit that I believe is in Gloucester, Massachusetts, that applies to the Endangered Species Act. And if you will read in your packet all these listed animals, and when Mr. Spinard also talked about making sure that there would be no harm to listed animals, those are in the Endangered Species Act. And the only marine mammal that is addressed in your packet from a long discussion from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, pages 37 to 52, they talk about the right whales. The right whales are not in the bay this time of year. So they talk about sea turtles at length, not in the bay this time of year, too cold. They talk about sturgeon, nice fish, but not in the bay this time of year. It's not their season. They talk about right whales, beautiful, huge marine mammals that are an endangered species. But guess what? They're not in the bay, because guess what? They're too big. They don't come into the bay. They are happily swimming up and down between Nantucket and New York. So it is really disingenuous of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, of Quonset Development Corporation, and I am sorry, of your own staff, to represent to you that there was any communication with the Incidental Take Unit, which sits in Silver Spring, Maryland, of NOAA Marine Fisheries. There was no attempt to apply for an incidental harassment authorization, as Quonset knows it should do under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And there was no ability of the Incidental Take Unit to review these proposed mitigation measures, which are going to ensure that there's zero take. If they're so sure that there's going to be a zero take, why are they scared of running it by the Incidental Take Unit? They can do two things. They can apply for an IHA. Benjamin Laws will review it and he'll say, you know what, this looks good, or this looks bad, or let's do something different. They could also just get a letter of compliance. They did nothing, because for some reason they don't want real scrutiny of what they're doing to the seals. That's not right. And that's where you all come in. You absolutely have jurisdiction to make this permit contingent. You've got all your little list of CRMC, contingency provisions that you just asked Mr. Spinard, are you okay with these? These are CRMC things. He's like, yeah, I'm okay. Well, just add a couple more. Add that they trot down to Silver Spring, Maryland. Oh, guess what? They can pick up the phone, and I gave them the email address so they can email Benjamin Laws and start that incidental harassment authorization request as part of your blast permit. Or don't grant the blast permit until they come back and show you that they have gone through this application process. Under your statute, let's pull it up. 46-23-1, in the very beginning, little a, number 1. Let's see. It's talking about the people of Rhode Island, and they shall be secure in their rights to use and enjoyment of the natural resources of the state with due regard for the preservation of their values. And it is the duty of the General Assembly to provide for the conservation of the air, land, water, plant, animal, mineral, and other natural resources. These seals are our natural resources of the state, and to adopt all means necessary and proper by law to protect the natural environment of the people of the state by providing adequate resource planning for the control and regulation of the use of the natural resources of the state, and for the preservation, regeneration, and restoration of the natural environment of the state. And this statute creates you guys. Heck yeah, you've got the power and the authority to say, wait a minute, everybody, you're talking about NOAA, but I think you're talking about NOAA endangered species. I don't think you're talking about NOAA seals. And that's the incidental take unit in Silver Spring, Maryland. So why don't y'all go down there and just check that one box and then come back. Let's read Benjamin Law's email. Ms. Holloway, it says, December 3rd, NOAA Fisheries Office of Protected Resources, which is the office responsible for implementing the incidental take provisions of the Marine Mammal Protection Act, has no record of a request for incidental take authorization from Quonset Development Corporation. Quonset Development Corporation is not exempt from the requirements of the MMPA. NOAA Fisheries has not made any determination regarding whether the referenced project does or does not warrant an incidental take authorization, as we have not been presented with any request to do so by either Quonset Development Corporation or the Army Corps. Any such request would be informal, as the MMPA does not require that action proponents or other federal permitting agencies consult with NOAA Fisheries in order to proceed with an activity. It is important to note, this is what Mr. Spenard went on to read, that the incidental take provisions of the MMPA do not function to allow or permit activities. No, that's not what they do. That's what you do. You grant or deny a permit. But when somebody thinks that through construction blasting underwater in the winter near the seals who winter over here in the bay might, within a 4,662 foot perimeter, which they are not monitoring, might cause some damage to a seal through harassment or through physical injury, they go to the NOAA incidental take unit and they say, you know what, I want permission before I harm a seal. Give me permission. That is the IHA. That says, okay, you're good. You can blow 20 seals out of the water. No worries. Your mitigation stuff looks good. Looks like you're not going to blow more than 20 seals. But that's the first step. And they have completely missed it. And they have not only missed it, they've tried to cover up in front of you all that they didn't do it. And they talk about the Marine Mammal Protection Act and they smush it together with the Endangered Species Act, and they don't separate it out and they don't come clean and say, you know what, we really didn't want to run this by the incidental take unit, so we didn't. We're pretty sure that we're going to have 0 takes. I don't know how they're so sure. How do they know that some seal mother, isn't able to hear her pups clearly? How do they know? How do they know they're going to have 0 takes, that no seal was disturbed in its foraging? That, to me just does not ring true. So they can easily get their plan approved. I always learned trust, but verify. So verify that this plan that QDC is presenting is going to have minimal impacts, zero. I mean, if NOAA Incidental Take Unit says, guys, you're going to have 0 takes, you don't need this, they get a letter of compliance and Benjamin Laws signs off and says, hey, you're good. Or Benjamin Law says, no, you know, if you're going to blast in December and January, when let's look at the seal counts from Save the Bay that I believe I would like to make Exhibit A that I attached to one of my emails. You look at the seal counts from last year, you've got about 40 to 60 seals sitting around those islands around Rome Point. And they are well within this area, especially if you allow for 2 blastings during a 24-hour period. Then you are up to a big perimeter. You're up to more like 2 kilometers. And I think that's also in your packet at page 83. And I think then you're up to the 2,000 meters just for blasting out their eardrums. That's not, if you do 2 blasts in 2 blast events in a 24-hour period, I don't know what the huge perimeter for behavior disruptions is, but please do look at those. It's pages 80 through 83. No, maybe it's page 76. Page 76 through 83 is the JASCO engineering report on actually blasting the seals. But they didn't run that by the Incidental Take Unit.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Holloway. Do you have anything further to add?
Oh, I do. I just want you to please look at the MMPA, which is 16 U.S. Code 361 and following. You've got the prohibitions under 16 U.S.C. 1372, where it says it is unlawful for any person. That's QDC. Corporations or people, or vessel or any other conveyance to take any marine mammal in waters or on lands under the jurisdiction of the United States. And that's the rocks around Rome Point. And then it defines a take in 16 U.S. Code section 1362, subsection little 13. The term take means to harass, hunt, capture, or kill, or attempt to harass, hunt, capture, or kill any marine mammal. So those are the seals. And then you've got 16 U.S.C. 1377, which is the enforcement provision, because guess what? The federal government did want the Marine Mammal Protection Act to be enforced. And that's also where you come in. I also would like to be Exhibit B, the incidental take authorizations under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It's just a very brief, maybe 2 or 3 pages from the NOAA Fisheries website at www.fisheries.gov/permit/incidental take authorizations under Marine Mammal Protection Act. And that is very clear. It's written for the general public. It says about the Marine Mammal Protection Act and its implementing regulations allows, upon request, the incidental take of small numbers of marine mammals by U.S. citizens who engage in a specified activity within a specified geographic region. Incidental take is an unintentional but not unexpected take. Taking is prohibited with certain exceptions under the MMPA. And then it goes on to list construction projects are typically where incidental harassment authorizations emanate from and are applied to. And I think I also sent you some example IHAs for construction projects which involve blasting off of Alaska. And you all made Deep Wind Water, when they were doing their turbines and laying the cable You made deep wind water off of Block Island step up to the incidental take unit and get an IHA. And that was just for the noise of the ship and laying the cable. Could be very disruptive to our marine mammals, but this noise is much, much louder, much more harmful, and yet no IHA? What up, guys? QDC is worried about their time frame. They knew from 2017, they knew that they were going to have to blast rocks. I look on my chart on my wall and I see that 6 foot little teeny area. They showed you that 6 foot little teeny area that shows there are rocks there. Poor planning on their part does not create an emergency on your part. They can go back and they can do it right. Or you can figure out how to make them blast, not in a dredge window. Why does it have to be a modification? And so you're blasting in a dredge window. Why can't they blast in June or July or August when we have no marine mammals? Are flounder more protected than marine mammals? I don't think flounder have their own federal statutory scheme, but seals do. Let me see if there's one more thing. I also would take issue with Jeff Willis's summary to you, because again, he elides over the fact that nobody contacted the incidental take unit except me. So when he talks about NOAA on page 2, that's not the incidental take unit, and that's not Benjamin Laws. And unfortunately, one hand of NOAA does not communicate with the other hand. The Gloucester unit does not pick up the phone and say, hey, Ben, what do you think about this? No, they have their blinders on and they do endangered species. So let's see, where else? Oh, also on page 3, Mr. Willis is only talking about an exclusion zone of 409 meters. He's not talking about the big exclusion zone that JASCO is telling you is going to be needed, the 4,600 feet. Let's see, what else on page, oh yeah, and let's not forget that North Kingstown, when they gave their approval, even though 3 of the North Kingstown Town Council members were also members of the Board of Directors of Quonset Development Corporation. How convenient is that? They heard and approved their own permit request. That doesn't look right. And I think it's a violation of the state ethics statutes, where you don't read into the record your conflict because you're sitting on the Board of Directors of the applicant.
Ms. Holloway, I think you're getting.
I know, not a good look, but in their report that the town of North Kingstown adopted their harbor commission, the very first #1 thing, it says the requirements of the Marine Mammal Protection Act should be adhered to by the applicant regarding the harassment. We're not even just talking about blowing their eardrums out, the harassment of marine mammals inhabiting the area. So let's just circle back and say, you know what, you're all good if you do what you're supposed to do and go down to the incidental take unit. Let's see what happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Holloway. I think we have Arthur Hamilton next. Mr. Hamilton.
Hello.
Hi, do you want to turn on your video?
Yeah. Start video. Hi there. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak. I did send comments in. I hope all of you have had a chance to read them. They're very similar to the comments that I brought up to the North Kingstown Conservation Commission and the Harbor Management Commission joint meeting, then that many of my concerns were forwarded to the town council. The town council meeting, as Ms. Holloway had suggested, was more of a rubber stamp and I wasn't allowed to speak. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I only became aware of this dredging. Pardon me, my name is Arthur Hamilton. I live at 65 Rome Street, North Kingstown, Rhode Island. I have a summer property. I have a property at 78 Seaview Avenue, which is directly in front of Rome Point and the hummocks in Fox Island. I can see from my front yard, Quonset Point to Rome Point and the hummocks, 180 degrees. I've lived there my whole life. That was where my family home was at, and my great-grandfather built the house. So we know of this. The seals hadn't been there since maybe 1980. So I'm concerned just as a general advocate for the seals and for the local marine life. And not until I investigated or not until I learned of this permit was I in any way involved in any of this. So if you take a look at my notes, I'm just an interested neighbor. I support the General Dynamics Corporation and Electric Boat and their success and all the work that they do. After doing some cursory investigation, and I've found a lot of things that I disagree with from Mr. Spinard and the applicants of doing this. And they were called out in my long term in my meeting notes or my notes to the council. I will say a couple of things that QPD and Electric Boat are trying to push this forward because they've already done work. Today, as of today, the dredging was still going on today. So we still don't know what we don't know as far as dredging is going on. I saw the dredge barge and tug and spoils barge corralling off there. So as they dig, they may find more areas. 3 years ago, they approached the Harbor Management Commission to getting a permit for this channel, and the Harbor Management Commission called out to them that all these guys that were involved in the Harbor Management Commission, including the local fishermen, said, there's a lot of rocks there, and you might want to go over here, take a look at the chart. You have 16 feet over pretty well everywhere else. One of the things that I should note that I've seen, my background is a former marine engineer, so I've been around the waterfront quite a bit of my life, industrial, commercial, large waterfront activities, is they're using, as Mr. Spinard showed, a backhoe dredge, very similar to an excavator or a backhoe with just a big bucket of just pulling teeth. And I think this all derives, this whole problem that we're having here tonight, or this whole permit, is they didn't go back and ask for a cutter head dredge. And if they brought in a cutter head dredge that would be spinning and rotating and breaking off those pieces of rock, they wouldn't have the need to use explosive dredging. They could go in there and systematically go in there and cut into the rock. The head goes at like 200 RPMs. It's got hardened diamond-shaped teeth on it, and due to its mass and its speed, it starts just breaking off pieces of fist-sized rock instead of trying to come up and dig. That bucket that they showed you on his presentation is good when you're pulling up mud and you're pulling up, but it's a totally wrong application for knowing that you have rock there. So we made a mistake with going to the wrong location. We made a mistake for using the wrong piece of equipment. Now, I want to say a few things about the seals here in a moment, but one of the things that I brought up, and so did the people in the Harbor Management Commission, is, you know, General Dynamics is bringing in this new barge. This new barge is 300 feet long. It's drawing, what they're looking for is to get a 16-foot draft at mean low water is what they're trying to get. This transit, the amount of transits that are going through this channel, maybe once every month, once every 2 months. We're going to the nth degree to cut a trench in this, for this channel, where maybe they could say, well, we're just going to go at high tide. So we got a high tide range of a 6 foot or so, could very well easily eliminate any of this explosive dredging by just saying, we're going to do it at a different time of the day. We're going to come in from New London, and we're going to wait till we make our approach to the next high tide. All of this could be just eliminated if they just did this best practice. That would be my first mitigation. The next thing is we have time. The barge isn't due to be completed till mid of 2021. The public record and Bollinger Shipyard of where they're going to be building this down in Louisiana, and also with General Dynamics production facilities, they're not going to happen. They haven't even built the pier yet. So the pier has got to be built. That was just permitted. We've got a long amount of work to do to make the preparation to do this. So the immediacy of doing this work is not evident to me. So if we just step back and say, well, we're going to come back and we'll decide not to do any kind of explosive dredging, then maybe we could do a cutter head dredging. And in the interim, we could do time of day transits, time of tide. So there's a couple of different three things going on there. So like I said, I'm not a biologist. I'm just a neighbor. But some of the things that Ms. Holloway brought up were very appropriate and very similar to what you see on my notes, and including, I hope you've all had an opportunity to see the video, the Army Corps video of that I included in my submission to the Coastal Resources, and when they did the explosive dredging down in Philadelphia. And I don't want to say anything incorrect here, but this time of this startle of the fish is only about 10 or 15 seconds. It's a startle thing, and the startle goes off, and then 10 seconds later, the 10-second countdown happens. So we're at a 3,500 meter or 4,500 meter, which all the other incidental take permits call out of that much of a range. Then he's got to do something a little bit better as far as protecting the marine mammals. As a matter of fact, all the applications that were submitted to North Kingstown, Coastal Resources, Coastal Resources, the Harbor Management Commission, and the Conservation Commission, at no time did they even bring up the Marine Mammal Protection Act until I submitted that to the people of the town. And that was brought up, and that was enforced, and that was agreed upon by the Harbor Management Commission. And that's why they added those stipulations to the town council, because they act as like the first pass. So everything had to do with endangered species. We're not talking about endangered species. We're talking about marine mammal protection. Again, I'm not a biologist. I'm just a neighbor. So I went back and I did quite a bit. And one of the things that I do want to suggest And Mr. Spinard said it, I think he convoluted it a little bit different. You know, he made he made the reference that it was a zero take. And again, this was news to me because I only through my the World Wide Web and researching it. And the one thing that Ms. Holloway and all of her recommendations, she neglected the last part of the Marine Mammal Protection Act of that same code. And item in the, as I would say, 16 USC 1372 18A-2, a take is if it has the potential to disturb a marine mammal or marine mammal stock in the wild by causing disruption of behavioral patterns, including but not limited to migration, breathing, nursing, breeding, feeding, or sheltering. I too contacted that Maryland or office, and they just referred me to the Army Corps. I submitted my comments to the Army Corps of Engineers. News to me that the Army Corps has approved this because I submitted comments to them. I have perused it, and I have actually included a recent follow-up email to the Army Corps, and I haven't heard of any kind of declaration or any ruling of the permitting of this. And I just, while we started this meeting, I just looked to see if there was any kind of news or notification to the public on this, and I see none. So if I'm mistaken, or so that's where I'm coming from on that. There's something going on where we're not going through the whole process. Again, I'm supporting. I think they need to go off and do this. I want to see General Dynamics do this. I want to see them do this, but they got to do the right thing. And not until 3/4 into Mr. Spinard's PowerPoint, which was very professional, it was done very well, but it was until 3/4 through that he even brought up the word seal. And nobody said, well, you know, right now, as of last week, there's 50 seals out there. And each week goes by and there's more and more. And just as Ms. Holloway said, I've never met the woman. As the first time I've seen her or heard her name, God's green earth, that it gets to nearly 170 seals out there. But they're not only at Rome Point, but they're into Wickford, and they're into Saga Point, and they're into Cold Spring Rock, and they're into Hope Island, and they're in that whole area out there. And I would say that if you went and did some mitigation to the permitting, it was still allowing them to go forward, to bring their barge into there, but to go off and contract a cutterhead dredge, and in the interim time of day, when required, that this can all be done without using explosives. Explosives are the last worst thing that we want to do. We don't want to do it here. We don't want to do it at your neighbor's house. We don't want to do it anywhere around here. We don't want to do it in Newport. And we want to follow the law. The law is, the law is pretty specific as far as the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And if the people from National Marine Fisheries or you know, somebody's got to say that this is an okay thing to do, to harass or take, and this is certainly going to be including taking. Mr. Spinard also said there was 235 decibels of sound level, 235 decibels. That for a human above the water, if we're working in electric boat, it's 85 decibels is the limit. 85 decibels for 8 hours. If you have 100 decibels, you're already going into short-term hearing damage. You go into like 110, you're in permanent hearing damage. Any kid knows, or anybody that's been around the waterfront and they've been swimming down in that area, and they've dug their head in the water, and they can hear the outboard motor go by, you know, a half a mile away. God help us what they're gonna do to drive these seals out of our little area here. So that being said, I say to go back and take a look at that video of what it actually looks like and what the impact would be from the Army Corps of Engineers on Delaware River. And suggested again, the barges are going to be ready until mid next year. The equipment to be transited out of there isn't going to be getting ready to get out of there until, you know, maybe 2022. And because if I'm not mistaken, not even one hull has yet to be started there, any Columbia class.
Looks like Mr. Hamilton's,
The building facilities.
I guess.
And I'm sorry, I'm just really doing quick.
you just-
And if they contract if you contract a cutter head dredge, that this could all be done.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you.
We've been going for close to 2 hours. I need to switch my device for the video, and I think we should take a break. Let's come back at 8 p.m. I'm going to sign off. Everyone can stay on, but I got to go on to a different device. Thank you. Ryan? Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay, just checking on my new device.
loud and clear.
Thanks. All right, looks like we're just waiting for Ron and Joy, and then we can get started again.
Are we waiting for Tony as well?
I don't think he's coming back.
Okay.
Is that true, John?
Is Tony coming back? No, he's not.
Okay.
Are we wide open to the group now?
Yes.
Okay. I think we can start up again. Mr. Moore, we're good on your end?
We are good.
Okay. All right, so we concluded with Mr. Hamilton, and I believe that Mr. Spinard, on behalf of the applicant, had his hand up, probably wanted to respond to the objector's comments. And I think that was the only additional hand that I saw. I did see Mike Jarbeau, but oh, well, he just put his hand up. All right, I think that I'll ask Mr. Jarbeau to comment first, and then Mr. Spinard can comment on anything he wants of those collective three. Hi, Mr. Jarbeau.
Good evening. Can everyone see me and hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Great. Thanks, Madam Chair, for acknowledging me and members of the council. Mike Jarbeau, Jarbeau, on behalf of Save the Bay. So to start, fully understanding that the Marine Mammal Protection Act is under the purview of the federal government, I just wanted to make a few brief points. Previous speakers clarified a lot of the points that I wanted to bring up based on Mr. Spinard's testimony about the MMPA, so I'll pass over them. But I just do want to emphasize the point that mitigation measures detailed only reduce the chance of impact. There's no way to guarantee that there will be no takes of marine mammals, specifically seals in this case. Since the applicant can't eliminate those impacts, federal authorization should have been requested in this case. Additionally, Save the Bay is discouraged by the applicant's decision to ignore local knowledge and conditions. During initial project planning, information was provided that indicated rock was likely to be encountered. Despite that, the project proceeded, leading to these last-minute changes to address the rock in time to meet the dredging window. It now appears that relevant information and data has not been incorporated into the necessary protections for marine mammals, as has been detailed by some previous speakers. The application, including federal approval documents, fails to reference well-known nearby seal haul-out sites, seasonal migration trends, or location-specific mitigation measures that could have been put in place. Save the Bay has been monitoring seal populations in Narragansett Bay since 1994. Our data clearly shows that the proposed blasting period approaches the peak population window for seals, and it's taking place near the most populated haul-out site in the entire bay off of Rome Point. Based on this information, there's an extremely strong potential for seal harassment or injury, and authorization should have been requested as prescribed by the MMPA to include public notice in the Federal Register and additional public discourse on this issue that we're talking about right now. Finally, NOAA guidance indicates that incidental take authorizations require a minimum of 5 months to process, up to a year or more. At Save the Bay, we're concerned that pressure to complete the blasting in this upcoming window in January up till December and January is the primary reason the applicant chose not to proceed through the NOAA and the Marine Mammal Protection Act authorization process. Based on this fact, we encourage the council to consider whether additional stipulations are prudent in this case, seeking outside expertise if necessary at the expense of the applicant. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Spinard, you're up to respond to any of the objectors' comments. I do have a couple of questions for you as well.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
You're a little bit faint.
Okay. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond. I certainly can respond to many of the comments that have been made if the council members wish me to. But I specifically wanted to respond to this 4,000 meter that had been mentioned. If you read the JASCO report, the 4,000 meters is what we call a level B zone, which is behavioral modification. Again, read in the report, they indicate that if there's only one blast per day, which we're doing, you don't have to monitor that zone because one blast per day is not going to go into that zone and affect behavioral modification. So I did want to make that clarification. Again, if there's any other clarifications that are needed by the council members, I'll be happy to try to do so.
I have a question for you based on Mr. Hamilton's repeat comment about the use of proper or improper equipment for the dredging work so far, and his suggestion that a different piece of equipment should have been used. I'd like you to respond to that and then, ask if you exhausted all non-blasting options, including different pieces of equipment.
Yes, we have. And I have spoken to the major international and national dredge companies, Cashman, Great Lakes Dredge and Dock Company, etc. And they have all indicated that a cut ahead is not an effective way of removing rock. If it was, they would use it. And so they have indicated that it's not effective. That's why blasting is required. And again, this is coming from the experts who do this around the world. Now, as far as the other point about the rock bucket, that was used in the blasting area. When we leave the blasting area, the dredging that is going on now, which we have a permit to do, is using a different type of bucket. And actually it's a larger bucket, but it's made not to remove rock, but to remove the sediment. So again, these are the experts, and that's what they're doing. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Question about reviews or no reviews by NOAA, whether or not you had communications with the incidental take office or not. Can you address that, whether or not you had any communications with that office, whether you believe you were required to or not have communications? Just address that in general.
Sure. So
you did in your initial presentation, but I think I'd like to hear more expansive response.
Sure. So as I mentioned in my presentation, we had extensive consultation with the federal agencies. That included the Office of Protective Services, Mr. Ben Law. Okay, we had consultations with him primarily on an informational basis so that we could understand the requirements of the Mammal Protection Act. And so we could understand what the proper response was. And from those conversations, we learned it was the strategy that we developed for the robust monitoring program so that we would actually say 0 takes. A take is something that a take is almost like a license to kill. That's not what we're going to do. That's not what we want to do. We want 0 takes. I have explained the robust monitoring program that we're doing so that we will have 0 takes. I've explained the experience of Cashman and Fathom in terms of their experiences, so we will have 0 takes. But yes, we did have consultation.
Fathom and Cashman, those two both worked on the New Bedford blasting project that resulted in the 0 take?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and you're using both of those for your blasting project and using the same techniques for monitoring?
Actually, we're using more monitoring. They did not have the hydrophones. We're actually using more monitoring.
Okay, thank you.
More methods.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Mr. Spinard? From council members? Mr. Gomez, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, just would like him to, I would like Mr. Spinard to comment relative to the suggestion of mitigation by changing the season for the explosions to when there are less seals in particular in the area. What's the reason for not considering that?
I'm not sure if there's less seals in the area, but that's a question that perhaps Mr. Reese or Mr. Goulet could answer, because there is a window, and the reason for that window is because of protection of fish as well as marine mammals in terms of their breeding areas and the time of year that they do it. And that's why we're so limited in terms of dredging as well as the blasting. So quite frankly, I don't believe we would be allowed to do it outside of the window.
Okay, so your take is that you would probably not be able to be allowed to do it outside the window.
That's correct.
For other reasons other than just seals.
That's correct.
Just a quick question on the explosions. Are they an impulse nature, like, black powder, or are they kind of a timed release to spread the energy out a little bit?
That's exactly correct. So the explosive material itself is called a sausage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like formed like a sausage.
I'm familiar.
Great. And so what happens is that so you drill the hole. The hole is probably somewhere like 8 to, well, almost 10 feet. You pack the explosives, and then on top of that, for 2 or 3 feet, you pack rock, which is used to confine the blast into the rock area, as well as minimize the shock wave that it can result from the blast.
Right. So in fact, you're getting a spreading nature of sorts on the pulse, as opposed to an impulse, which is very high sound pressure level for a very short time.
Exactly.
It contains all the energy in a very short period, as opposed to a little longer period.
Exactly, because each one of the blast that are in the holes, there's a delay between them.
Yes.
So you don't get the full impact of the blast because they're all being delayed. So really what happens is, and you know better than I do, that this is microseconds.
I understand.
So when you delay the thing, you're actually just getting like one blast at a time.
Yeah,
rather
I
than
understand.
full roll.
That was, to me, the impulse nature is bad. Spreading it out is a good alternative. And I think you've answered my concern.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Spinard? I have a question for you, Mr. Reese.
Yes, Madam Chair.
So we started off, well, actually, Mr. Goulet talked about how we don't have the expertise at CRMC, to evaluate for impacts to marine mammals, endangered species. So we rely upon our federal partners to identify what those potential impacts would be and how you protect against them. So I guess our role as the CRMC would be to ensure that someone qualified to do that did that. In your opinion, has that been done?
Yes, it is in my opinion that has been done. The Army Corps of Engineers is the lead federal agency. And we've also coordinated with DEM Fish and Wildlife. The way the coastal program is written is the staff is supposed to identify any other prerequisite permits that are necessary for the action that is being requested. And in this case, there are permits required from the Army Corps of Engineers and the DEM. Both of those permits have been issued. And for instance, with the Block Island Wind Farm, where we worked very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers, applications and conditions for incidental take were coordinated through the Corps. That's been our experience. So we rely upon that, our coordinated efforts with the Corps as a lead federal agency to coordinate with NOAA and respective other federal agencies having to do with federal programs and laws. It's beyond our expertise, but it's also beyond our jurisdiction. So the coastal program says that we have to make sure that these other prerequisite permits are obtained to account for these types of impacts.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Okay, and I'm looking for Mr. Willis. Mr. Willis, would you address the email that's been discussed by Ms. Holloway?
Oh, certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. I noted during that discussion that Ms. Holloway referenced her December 3rd email, which is in your packet of material, and was forwarded to myself, a number of DEM employees, Save the Bay, Army Corps of Engineers, in response to Mr. Law's response to her. And she read part of the email that Mr. Laws out of NOAA sent to her, but she didn't finish the last paragraph. And I thought that was something that could shed some light to the council members in helping them make a decision. The last paragraph begins with a sentence she did read, but I will read it again very quickly. It's important to note that the incidental take provisions of the MMPA do not function to allow or permit activities, but rather to authorize take that is expected to occur incidental to those activities. Therefore, Mr. Laws says, entities conducting activities are not necessarily required to obtain incidental take authorizations or to consult with NOAA fisheries. What they must do is avoid any unauthorized take of marine mammals, which, in general, may be accomplished by either requesting authorization for take that they expect to occur, despite any mitigation or monitoring, or by implementing a mitigation and monitoring plan that avoids the take. I think staff has explained in their staff report and here orally, and I believe we heard from Mr. Spinard as well, that the applicant has and will be implementing a mitigation and monitoring plan that looks to avoid the take. I just thought that was an important note to make. And Dave had already spoken about the incidental take permit with Deepwater Wind, and my understanding is that was more a right whale issue because of 24/7 pile driving that was occurring over an extended period.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Okay, any other questions for for Mr. Spinard before we close the public hearing? Okay. Anything more from you, Mr. Spinard?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and open up for further discussion or a motion.
Just, Madam Chair,
Mr. Gomez.
yeah, one of the things, I got a bunch of notes that I put through here. We've gone through some of the answers, have taken care of them. But one of the thoughts that I have is that, you know, we're working for the greater good here. We absolutely need this project to proceed on schedule. I had some reasonable answers on why we didn't use a cut ahead and why you can't, you know, the other mitigation avenues that we're taking. But the greater good is really the protection of the United States and getting so that we're on a parity again with the Chinese especially and the Russians. And I don't want to go too deeply in that because I'll be getting myself in trouble. But I would point out this is a one-time occurrence. And it's not something we're going to be doing every year to the seals. I guess I missed the point that there'd be only one explosion per day. And the form of the explosion, from my background, is the least harmful way to spread the energy out. When we built the Newport Bridge, we had less of these environmental things that we had to think about, but that bridge was designed so the largest Navy ship could get in underneath it, and it cost us a lot more money to put together, and we had a lot of care, and we did that, but it was a one-time build. This project is the same. We really need, and again, it's supporting our military defense, but it's a one-time thing. So I think we just have to suck it up and for the greater good, you know, proceed along with the project. Not only is it a national security concern, it also impacts several thousand jobs for the state of Rhode Island. So that's my feeling on it.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Mr. Hudner.
Madam Chair, I agree with Don about the greater good here, but I think that this project has been extremely well conceived and analyzed and regulated. It's thoughtful in every respect. The applicant's done, I think, a phenomenal job. Our staff has done a phenomenal job. The collaborating regulators, the Corps and the NOAA have done a great job. I don't think that there's a meaningful risk here that, I mean, there's been some misrepresentation actually from some of the objectors about what's actually being done. The same thing they've accused the applicant of. I thought that was a bit unfair when we got to the balance of the letter from NOAA. So I think this on its own merits, with regard to the Red Book, it meets all the qualifications to be approved, as well as a compelling national interest, but we don't have to go there to justify this, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Mr. Hudner. I think that the proper due diligence and research and use of appropriate experts were used to figure out this problem. They started with a bigger problem. They got it down to a smaller problem. They went to a monitoring program that worked in New Bedford with a zero take, and then they improved upon that program. I would rather have a program designed to be a zero take than to assume that they're going to take and go in that way. I mean, that's the wrong approach. The approach should be, we need to do everything we can to minimize the impact and have a zero kill or impact, not assume that we will do it and just go ahead and do it. So I like the approach. I think it's been well thought out, presented, studied, and I agree with you that we don't need to go to the national security interest. But that is just added support for this project, that there is a compelling security interest here. I appreciate the comments made by the objectors on the process and whether or not certain offices should have been conferred or permits pulled. I appreciate their attention to that. However, their beef is not with us. It's others who determine that. It's not within our jurisdiction. And if it's been determined by the Corps that that's not necessary in conferring with NOAA, then we are not to undermine that determination and come up with our own conclusion, which we don't have the expertise to comment on, as has been explained by our staff. So I feel comfortable about this project. I'm in support of this project, and I think it should move forward. Any other council members?
Madam Chair, it's Ron.
Mr. Gagnon?
Yeah, I agree, and I'd also like to add that there was really significant cooperation among the state and federal agencies. They all put a lot of work into this, and the result is that we have permits that are all in agreement with each other. All the conditions are consistent among all three permits, and I think that's really important and a significant factor here, and that's why I think we should approve the project also.
Thank you. That's a good point. Anyone else from council who'd like to comment? Okay, if Mr. Hudner, you have additional comment? You're on mute.
If there are no comments, I'd be pleased to propose the approval of this.
Yes, would you like to make the motion?
I move that we approve the application with whatever stipulations. It's been hard to follow whether anything actually changed tonight. I don't think it did, but if it did, whatever any new stipulations might be, they should be included. But I think this is a very well thought out project, and it's been correctly endorsed by the staff, who've done a great job.
Thank you. Just to confirm with Mr. Goulet or Mr. Reese, all the conditions appear on pages 5 through 9, or yeah, through 9 of the staff report. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. That is actually the draft modification approval to be issued by the council. So pending your authorization, this is exactly the document that will be in the office.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure there's nothing new because Mr. Hudner wondered out loud about that. All right. Okay. So the motion is to approve in the form that's been provided on pages 5 through 9 of the staff report. Is there a second?
Don Gomez will second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, if none, I'm going to do a roll call. Vice Chair Ray Koya.
Madam Chair, based upon the evidence that's been presented and testimony from staff, and more importantly, as some comments were indicated, reliance on some external agencies that we need to rely upon, I am voting aye. So I'm relying on the evidence that's been presented, the testimony of our staff, but also the reports of that external agency. So that's the support for my approval.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. Mr. Sahajian.
Aye.
Mr. Hudner.
Aye.
Mr. Gomez.
Don Gomez, aye.
Ms. Montanaro.
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Ms. Reynolds.
Reynolds, aye.
And myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion to approve the project carries. Thank you to the applicant and for the objectors' thoughtful comments. And with that, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And I would move to adjourn.
Would you like
Is
a
there-
motion or you're making?
I am moving it.
I second it.
Okay,
Hudner.
thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Best wishes for Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Be
Yes,
safe,
thank
everyone.
you. Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Thank you.